there's no telling really what you're going to encounter.
No,
So
you're absolutely right.
so how are you even able to plan? Are you planning on like best case scenario? Are you planning on worst case scenario? Are you somewhere in the middle? How many batteries are you taking? Like what is your thought process just with these like, and I'm assuming this is for each aspect, you know, like
Yeah.
cuz you can't take more gear than you need. That increases the risk of death.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, I had to break it down essentially into three phases, right? The Kathmandu filming, which Kathmandu is a very chaotic environment. I don't know if you've been to Kathmandu, but it's like no other city I've ever been to in the world. And a lot of that's run and gun kind of filming, again, for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. You can't sanitize the location. You can't set it up. You can't block it off. You can't keep access from, for example, a Hindu temple or or a Buddhist temple or anything like that, or even through the streets of Kathmandu. So I leaned a lot on my, sketch comedy stuff that I did in the past and my improv experience where it was run and gun, try to get the content that you're getting, but be able to improvise on the spot, on the fly to make adjustments in order to try to get that content along with my guys that are filming with me, right? And so that's phase one. Once we got up into the mountains and flew to Lukla, from Lukla on to Everest Base Camp, like I mentioned before, it's a 9-day trek. I said, okay, and this point is now it becomes very physically demanding, right? And it becomes very environmentally dependent because the weather can change at those altitudes in the Khumbu Valley instantaneously. Where in Kathmandu, it's pretty stable. It's going to change as the normal, forecasted weather would change in Denver, New York, or anywhere else. Up there, it's not. It's mountain weather, so storms come in at a moment's notice, and they can go away at a moment's notice. So I knew at that time, I said, all right, with my guys that were trekking along with me and the trail interviews and all the stuff that we were doing, we're going to do a lot of this stuff as we go and break it up to depending on what the trek allows us to do, meaning there's certain villages that you get to by a certain benchmark in time, and then you go stay in a tea house and you go to the next day and then you acclimatize and wait for a day, and then you go on and all the way down the line for those 9 days to base camp. So we scheduled it out based on our trekking schedule there. All right, I can do trail interviews with Tashi and other people along the way. As we're walking, I can do that with a gimbal and interview people as we're walking. We can do that. But all the other stuff where we're sitting down and we're interviewing people, we had to schedule that out based on where we're going to be. However, power was an issue, like you mentioned, with the batteries, right? So we said, okay, and also hard drive space. All right, we have X amount of little SD cards and drives that we're going to have to then dump when we get to a tea house. But if we don't have power at a tea house, then we're relying on solar power and hope that we have enough juice in our MacBooks and our PCs as well as the hard drives in order to dump the footage for that day. So that was again don't know what you're going to get kind of a deal. You just hope that when you got to a tea house, and this happened multiple times where we didn't have enough juice. Okay, when we get to the next tea house and we have an acclimatization day, let's say day 5 or day 6, hopefully we have enough solar power. Hopefully it'll be sunny. We can get, the solar panels, some juice into the battery, charge up the drives and get power to the computers, and then we'll dump them and catalog then. And if it didn't happen, then we'd have to push it out the next day and just hope and hope and hope. And it was one of those kind of things to try to make up for lost time along the way. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff. And then when you got to phase 3, which was actually there's probably 4 phases. Phase 3 is base camp itself, setting up essentially our home office, our home base for the next 42 days. Okay, here we had a production tent where we again set up the computers, set up the drives, and we would catalog footage and dump stuff down every day after interviews, and doing acclimatization hikes, doing test hikes into the ice fall and so on. Again, there was 3 days, for example, where we had no sun at all at base camp. So then that backlogged us again. And so we just had to constantly be diligent on, when we saw sun, when we had power, take advantage of that time, right? On the mountain itself, completely different story. Everything I saw about Everest, everything I studied about Everest, all my climbing experience, I really geeked out about, doing my homework on Mount Everest. Throw that all out the window as soon as you step into the Khumbu Icefall. It's like Russian roulette. It literally is. And everything just changes on a fly. You have to give up, some trust and power to the mountain. Otherwise, you're not going to get any further. And that's where that war reporter mentality kind of kicked in and kind of saved me to a large degree. You're climbing in an ice fall that they say is, many people say is the deadliest 2 miles on Earth. A lot of people have died in the ice fall. It's moving between 3 to 6 feet a day downhill, so it's never the same. Every time you go through it, you have Jenga block size chunks of ice the size of houses collapsing at a moment's notice. You have crevasses that get wider and deeper as the expedition goes on. You have those ladders that are
This
strung
is the
together.
deadliest maze on Earth, correct?
Yeah, that's it. That's
Right.
definitely the deadliest maze on Earth, and it's a constantly shifting maze. And so you get to that first ladder crossing with 3 or 4 or 5 Home Depot ladders tied together with fishing twine, and it's moving 3 feet up and down, and you only have about 1 inch on your toes and 1 inch on your heels of purchase to try to walk across those ladders while you're trying to film with a camera. It kind of gave me the opportunity to be like that war reporter where you're sitting there, you're documenting a war scene and bullets are flying by, but you don't think you're going to get hit because you're not a combatant, right? I'm not fighting for this side or that side. I'm just documenting. Well, unfortunately, bullets don't care. And hence, a lot of war reporters get hit, and a lot of war reporters ultimately die in combat environments because they get kind of lost behind the lens, right? And that's kind of what happened to me. I was getting lost behind the lens, trying to focus me walking across the ladder and filming it, or me, climbing up a Sirac and so on and filming it. Well, then the avalanche comes and hits you, and I pull out my camera to try to film it instead of protecting myself. And so I got kind of lost in that. So that was a good thing to some degree because it took away the fear that maybe I would have, experienced.
Wait a second. An,
But
an
but
avalanche
on the
comes
same
and your
token,
first reaction is, I'm gonna grab my camera. I'm gonna get this. That's what you're.
that's exactly right. And we got hit by an avalanche. For example, you see it in the 2D film. And I pull out my camera, scrambling to try to get the camera out while the expedition leader, Ryan, says, duck and clip, which means you get low and clip into the rope and then let the snow go over the top of you. And hopefully, you're still in one piece when that's all said and done. Well, my dumb thought was, no, get out the camera, gotta get this shot. And again, that was stupid from a mountaineering perspective. But on the same token, I wasn't scared of that moment like the other climbers that were with me, because I was trying to film it. And so, yeah.
Right,
And
right.
so it's a give or take deal.
Incredible. So you said, I think you said 52 days, or you said 42 days from here. Is that guaranteed? Is that like what your guide says? Like, if this is, we'll be back on this day, or is that?
No, not at all. Not at all. And again, that's where when you mention the planning aspect, you have a general rough estimate. It's going to be 2 months or less. The climbing permit that you get from the Nepalese government to climb Mount Everest lasts for 2 months. So it'll start in April and it ends June 1st. Hell or high water, you got to be off the mountain by then. So
Yeah,
how
sure,
many?
sure.
How many? How many? Or you don't come off the mountain at
That's what
all.
I mean.
There's
Yeah,
340
nobody's coming to
people that have
get
died
you,
up there.
so it's no. You don't really have to come down if you don't
Yeah,
want
right, right. There's there's 340 people that have died on Everest, so yeah, that is true. But the permit, from a climbing standpoint, you have that window, so okay, it's not going to be longer than 2 months, but it could be anywhere in between that. So it took us 52 days, and that's anywhere between 52 to, let's say, 48 to 58 is about where the average lies.
Wow.